I appreciate that GE Aviation, Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Siemens Energy have now decided to make a conscious effort to focus on U.S. suppliers. It sends a strong message, by the way, all around the world, to our allies and adversaries alike. As some of you may know, Congress is in the middle of trying to conference, which means find a resolution between differences of a House and Senate bill on competitiveness. In fact, just this past week, we finished all of the preliminary work on it. We're going to conference next week. I'm one of the conferees for that legislation. It's about competitiveness, and it would complement the AM Forward Pact that's being announced today. All the more important that we get it done. By the way, innovation is where manufacturing happens. Let me give you an interesting statistic. Since 2003, U.S. R&D expenditures in China have grown 13.6% annually on average, but in the United States, just 5% on average. We've got to turn that around, don't we? If we want America to remain the innovation leader, and we saw some great technology just a little while ago that's added to manufacturing, we got to make sure that we are making things here in America, because that's where the research follows. That's where the dollars are that are going to make us competitive. This bill also appropriates $52 billion to incentivize the domestic semiconductor industry through the CHIPS Act. As the President will tell you, this is very important to Ohio. We just have an announcement by Intel to make a $20 billion investment in the Columbus area. But he said it could be about $100 billion if we get this CHIPS Act passed, which is part of this competitiveness legislation. That's really important, not just to Central Ohio, not just to the Buckeye State, but to our entire country. All of these investments in our R&D ecosystem will boost our competitiveness. But it was not going to work if we're not protecting ourselves better from the bad actors, particularly China. And through programs, China comes into our country, finds the best research, the best researchers, pulls that research and uses it to fuel their own economy and their own military. We've got to stop that. That's why the Bipartisan Safeguarding American Innovation Act is included in this competitiveness legislation. This legislation is a result of a year-long investigation into this issue. I chaired the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations at the time. We found out what was going on, had been going on for 2 decades, and this legislation is meant to address it. It has the support of the administration, and my hope is that we include that in the final package, because we've got to be sure that we're not just the best at innovation, but that it's not being stolen from us. As a conferee, I'm also pushing for Senator Brown's and my legislation called Level the Playing Field Act 2.0. We already did 1.0. And the administration, through their U.S. trade representatives, has also been very helpful with that and supportive. This, again, is primarily about China, being sure they play by the rules. And if we don't pass this legislation, they'll continue to go around the trade rules that we have and unfairly compete with American workers. We've got to stop that. And this legislation will do that with regard to China. I'm looking forward to moving quickly on all these differences between the House and Senate bill and resolving this, because it's too darn important for America to get caught up in partisan politics here. We've got to keep this as focused as possible on one issue: how to ensure that American workers are given the tools to be able to compete in the global marketplace. If it's a level playing field and they've got the tools, we'll do just fine, right? America will do just fine. So I'm now supposed to introduce my colleague, Sherrod Brown. He's a Democrat, I'm a Republican, and they have me introducing him. I don't know why. But it's because we work together on these issues, and we are co-authors of this Level the Playing Field 2.0. He's also supportive of this broader legislation I talked about, the competitiveness legislation, and it's important that we work together on behalf of the workers of Ohio. Sherrod Brown.
Rob Portman, thank you. And Rob is concluding his 2 very successful terms in the U.S. Senate, his 12 years, and thank you. And we've and going out as he's working so hard on the Ukraine, on Russia, Ukraine, on his and especially on these economic issues, level playing field, infrastructure, those issues that matter so much to all of us. We know that for generations, Ohio was a global leader in manufacturing and innovation, the lifeblood of our communities. But beginning in the 1970s and the 1980s, essentially we stopped making things in America the way we did. Corporate America wanted cheap labor wherever they could find it. They lobbied Congress successfully for tax breaks and bad trade deals so they could hopscotch the globe in search of lower and lower wages. Ohio has paid the price for years in the form of lost jobs and lost opportunity. Now the whole country pays the price, higher prices, supply chain disruptions and delays, losing entire high-tech industries to competitors like China. Look where we've ended up. An Ohioan invented the light bulb. Today, 99% of LED light bulbs are made in China. America invented the semiconductor. Today, 75% of them are made in East Asia. But for the first time in decades, we have a president and an administration that understands the damage this corporate business model has done to our state, to this region, and to the country. President Biden is committed to making more in America. That's why we're all here today. That's why UPM has helped us with this and so many others, my friend Sue Helper and Chris Levin and so many others. It's why the President signed into law our strongest ever Buy America protections that Senator Portman and I worked on to ensure that American tax dollars support American jobs. No Bay Bridges in California made of Chinese steel. If it's U.S. tax dollars, those products are made in America by American workers. And it's why we're here today, facilitating partnerships with Ohio suppliers like UPM and America's premier manufacturers like GE Aviation. President Biden, and I say this without equivocation, President Biden is the most pro-worker, pro-union, pro-manufacturing president in at least a generation. You will never hear him use the term Rust Belt. We're burying the term Rust Belt. We were burying it in Columbus with Intel. We're burying it in Cleveland with the Export-Import Bank. We're burying it in Cincinnati with GE and UPM and Butler Tech and UC. It's what Joe Biden and I have been fighting for our whole career. When you love this country, you fight for the people who make it work. It's what Joe Biden has done his whole life. It's what he's doing as president. Mr. President, welcome to Cincinnati. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherrod, for that introduction. Folks, he's a real champion of really important aspect of work. My dad used to say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your place in the community. What these guys do is they care about the dignity of the worker. And I see things are really beginning to change. I really believe it. And Senator Portman, since he's not running again, I can say all the nice things about him that I want. And it won't get him in any trouble because he's leaving. But Rob spoke at the White House when I signed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law that they both helped put together. And the truth of the matter is we may not agree on everything, although we agree more than he wanted to admit. I want to thank him for his leadership for bringing folks together to find common ground. You know, things have kind of changed since the days when I first got there. He's been there a couple terms. I was there. I got elected when I was 29 years old in the United States Senate from a very modest background, and I was there for 36 years before becoming vice president. We always used to fight like hell, and even back in the old days when we had real segregationists like Eastland and Thurman and all those guys. But at least we end up eating lunch together. Things have changed. We got to bring it back. And Rob, I'm sorry you're leaving because you're one of the good guys. I mean because the way you treat other senators, the way you treat everybody. I appreciate it. And Sherrod and Rob and I were together at the White House in January. And we were with the CEO of Intel, who asked whether he'd come to the White House. He wanted to talk to me. And he announced at the White House a $20 billion commitment to build state-of-the-art semiconductors and a mega site on nearly 1,000 empty acres just near Columbus, I should say. It's one of the largest investments of the kind, period, that we've ever had in all American history. 7,000 jobs building the facility, 3,000 permanent jobs to run that facility. You know what the average salary is going to be for that person, the folks working in that factory? $135,000 a year. they're going to get paid a decent wage, and they're not all experts and college-educated folks, a lot of blue-collar folks too. Making a timely, this thin little computer chip that literally powers everything in our life these days. Almost everything in life, including the cell phone you're holding up. It makes a difference. In my State of the Union address, I called it a field of dreams, where America's future is going to be built. And I quoted Sherrod at the time because he said he's going to bury the label Rust Belt. He's going to bury the label Rust Belt. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and we used to, from Scranton all the way through Ohio and all the way across the Midwest, be the manufacturing citadel of the world. Today, we're joined by leaders of some of the biggest manufacturers in the country. GE, Siemens Energy, Honeywell, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, to announce a new initiative that going to bury that label for good, the Rust Belt. You know, we're at this plant because it's smaller manufacturers are going to make this happen. And we're here to show why, along with the innovation bill in front of Congress, all this is going to help address what is on everyone's mind: fighting inflation, getting prices down. Just toured the Productivity Bay today looking at cutting-edge 3D printing. And we met with a group of suppliers that use 3D printing to make parts for big complex machines like aircraft, power generators, consumer products like hip implants. It goes across the board. And now, for the folks at home, you might ask, what does it matter to you at home? Well, I know you're worried about the price of gas, food, and other necessities. And why it matters if we make more things here in America. Well, it matters a great deal because the pandemic and the economic crisis that we inherited and Putin's war in Ukraine have all shown the vulnerability when we become too reliant on things made overseas. We learned the hard way that we can't fight inflation if supply chains buckle and send prices through the roof every time there's a disruption, which have been constant disruptions, particularly in South Asia. We know that one of the best ways to fight inflation is to bring prices down, is to strengthen the resilience of our supply chains. And that includes making more things here in America, at home, from top to bottom. And that's been my priority since day one. If I can slow here for just a second and point out that, you know, I didn't realize, I'd been a senator for a long time, then a vice president for 8 years. I didn't realize there was an act passed back in 1939. It was called Buy American. I didn't know it existed. It's totally within the bounds of negotiated deals on trade. It says that when the president spends your money appropriated by the Congress, the president should only buy products or let contracts for things that are made in America, whether it's the deck of an aircraft carrier or it's a computer chip. Today's job report shows our plans and priorities have produced the strongest job creation in the modern times of the American economy. Today's report shows we created 428,000 jobs last month. And that means we have now created a total of 8.3 million jobs in my first 15 months in office with the help of the gentleman behind me. The unemployment rate now stands at 3.6%, the fastest decline in unemployment in the start of a president's term ever recorded. Again, because of the guys behind me. Black unemployment has been cut nearly in half since I took office. And unlike previous administrations, where the deficit went up, every single year we've reduced the deficit. Last year, with all we've done, we've reduced the deficit. Does this work? We reduced the deficit by a total of $350 billion. That's reduced the deficit last year. And this year, by the end of the fiscal year, by October 1st, we will reduce this year's deficit by $1.5 trillion. Never in the history of America has that happened before. And the backbone of our recovery is manufacturing. Manufacturing employment is up in America, 545,000 jobs since I took office, the largest 15-month gain since 1985. And these manufacturing jobs matter because they fuel our economic growth. They fuel exports. And as we've seen, they can fuel innovation. And that is a critically strong economic growth that we need. And folks, look, and in small and large towns across America, they bring quality jobs and middle-class jobs to people. If you again excuse me to digress a second, when I ran, I made it clear, and I have no bones about it. I was a senator for 36 years, so I'm not new to this. I'm tired of trickle-down economics. I've never seen it really work. But I tell you what, I'm a capitalist. I want to build this economy from the bottom up and the middle out, because when that happens, everybody does well. The poor have a way up, the middle class do fine, and the wealthy do very, very well. Never get hurt when that happens. Just ask small manufacturers here today in Ohio, Illinois, Florida, Connecticut, Virginia. They know what's going on. Folks, here, all of you know, every one of you know, that competitiveness and resilience of American supply chain rests on tens of thousands of small-sized manufacturers like the ones I met here today. That's where the supply chain in America is. And they account for nearly 99% of all manufacturing enterprises and more than 5 million American jobs. And every General Electric, Honeywell, Siemens Energy, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, there are hundreds, for every one of them, there's hundreds of, if not thousands of smaller suppliers that help these iconic American businesses compete globally. And when they do well, the big businesses do even better. These small firms are the foundation of America's industrial base. And increasing their capacity, which these big businesses are doing as well, is critical to making more things in America, getting products faster and cheaper and reliably and out-competing the rest of the world. That's what it's about. But here's the deal. 3D printing technology is incredible. It can reduce the parts and lead times by as much as 90%. Not always, but as much as 90%. Slash material costs by 90%. And cut energy use in half. That all helps to lower the cost making goods here in America. But not as small and medium-sized firms have access to the resources and financing and support they need to adapt to this technology until today. The executives here today have agreed to launch a new compact between large iconic manufacturers and smaller American suppliers. A commitment by these large companies to help those smaller ones adapt new technologies so we can continue to be the leading exporter of aircrafts and engines and in areas like medical devices, clean energy, technologies, and so much more. Look, our hope is that the compact will grow with more companies and expand into different industries. And as part of this initiative, agencies across the federal government, all across the federal government, are going to step up with access to loans, technical assistance, and so much more, including education. We're supporting this new partnership because this private sector has told us they can't do it alone. I'm a capitalist. I'm here and I believe in the free market. But I believe in the federal government's obligation to invest in America itself, invest in American workers. And we're at risk of falling behind. Decades ago, the federal government used to invest 2% of our entire GDP, 2% of our GDP in research and development. Well, guess what? We're down to invest in less than 1%. We were ranked number 1 in the world in R&D 3 decades ago. Number 1. Now we're ranked number 9 in the world. China was number 8 in the world 30 years ago. Now they're number 2 in the world. We've got to up our game. It's a simple proposition. If we do, everybody's going to win. That's the other reason why I came here today. Right now, Congress is considering a Bipartisan Innovation Act. That's what it's called. That's going to make generational investments in American innovation and manufacturing. Now look, if we're going to compete for the jobs of the future, we need to level the playing field with our competitors. The bill does that. The CEO of Intel told us that if this bill passes, what we're talking about, and the guys behind me support it, and they're actually moving it, this would increase the investment that Intel will make in Ohio, outside of Columbus, from $20 billion to $100 billion. And as we already say, that's no malarkey. That's a fact. $100 billion. Imagine what that's going to do for Ohio, let alone Columbus. Not a joke. Think about it. It'd be staggering. And it will nail down for generations the leadership of this state once again like it used to be 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And it's not just Intel. Foreign companies like Samsung and TSMC are ready to make the state-of-the-art chips, those computer chips, ready to make them in Arizona and Texas. They already have if this passes. And this is a bipartisan bill. Senators Brown and Portman have been working hard to get it done. So every Republican and Democratic member of Congress, most of us agree on this. Pass the damn bill and send it to me. If we do, it's going to help bring down prices, bring home jobs, and power America's manufacturing comeback. Look, it's also going to help reduce costs and strengthen our economic and national security. It's no wonder the Chinese Communist Party is literally paying lobbyists against this bill passing. If I note parenthetically again, I have spent, according to international folks, I spent more time with Xi Jinping, the leader of China, than any other world leader has. Over 76 hours. 9 of them on a telephone, the rest in person, since I was vice president and he was vice president of China. And you know what? He makes it real clear. He makes it real clear. He believes, like other autocrats around the world, that democracies can't compete in the 21st century because things are changing so rapidly. Technology is changing things in such a startling way. Countries are changing, literally changing their physical characteristics because of climate change. And he believes, and he says it straight up with me, that there is no way for democracies to compete with autocracies. Why? Because we have to reach a consensus when we're in a democracy. And it takes time. But autocrats can move immediately. They don't have to wait. Well, guess what? So far, the last decade, he's been right. So much has changed. Just look around the world, what's happening. Those of you who are international business people, look what you have to do when you go to China to do business. You have to give them access to everything. Everything you have, including your trade secrets. Not just China, though. China's not alone, but it is the single greatest competitor we have. And if we don't step up, we're going to be out. We're going to be out. And by the way, I showed up at a meeting called the G7, where the largest economies in the world meet. And guess what? 2 of them said to me that they thought that America's days were over as leader. I sat down at the meeting, the first meeting I attended. I have one on Saturday, but the first meeting I attended in England. And I had all the major G7 nations there, including 2 nations that were not members, including India. And I said, America's back. And the president of one of the major companies looked at me and said, for how long? For how long? Not a joke. You guys know it. I mean, these guys are sophisticated as hell. For how long? Well, guess what? They know we're back now. Not because of me, because of them, and all the attitude has changed in America. You've never seen a time when Europe and NATO was more closely aligned. No breathing room between us. Closer than we have ever been. Because a lot of us, I spent well over 120 hours, either in person or on the phone with my colleagues, my counterparts, every single solitary week and most days of the week, making it clear that for democracies to sustain what used to be the case, we have to step up our game across the board. You know, there's a thing for the Democratic Institute where I was supposed to hold a meeting of all the heads of state of democratic countries. We had to do it virtually from the White House. Well, guess what? In the last 10 years, there's 15 fewer democracies in the world. Fewer. Not more, fewer. So there's a lot at stake. But we're better prepared than anybody else. I know that Senator Brown and Portman are going to work with our colleagues to finish this bill, but it didn't, they did it in infrastructure. They're doing it again on this. Let's get this Bipartisan Innovation Act to my desk. And look, folks, just look at what's within our reach. I've never been more optimistic, and I mean this sincerely. I've never been more optimistic about America than I am today. Not because I'm president, but because everybody's waking up. It's a new time. Because of my economic strategy, companies and jobs are coming home again. We're making Buy America reality, not just a slogan. Because of the bipartisan infrastructure law that Sharon and Rob worked really hard to pass, we're going to rebuild America. We're going to rebuild a better America. $1.2 trillion. That bridge, if you really want to go to Kentucky, is going to get better. No, but really, we're talking about billions of dollars, modernizing roads, bridges, airports, delivering clean water, high-speed internet to every American. And it's going to move goods faster and more efficiently, lowering transportation costs, helping us outcompete anyone in the world. Where are those two beautiful young girls? You see these young girls here? They wrote me a letter about wanting me to help do more on trains. Well, guess what? Because of the guys behind me, we have allocated more money for rail systems in America than the entirety of the Amtrak appropriation began the first. And I know about Amtrak. I've traveled 1.2 million miles on Amtrak because I commuted every single solitary day, 270 miles a day, as my colleagues can tell you when the Senate was in session. You get a kick out of this, Sharon. The Secret Service doesn't like me taking the train because it stops too many places. And so I was riding home, though, to see my mom, who was living with me because she was in hospice, and on a Friday. And a guy named Angelo Negri, a senior conductor, walked up and said, "Joey, baby!" Grabbed my cheek. I thought he was going to shoot him. They go, "Joey!" I said, "Ange." I said, "He's okay. He's a friend." It's a true story. He said, "What's all this I read in the paper? You traveled over 1 million miles on Air Force planes." Every single mile a vice president or president travels, they keep a public record of on an American aircraft. And he said, "The boys and I were at the retirement dinner up in Jersey. So we figured it out. Average 222 days a year, 36 years. Total of 269 miles every day." Joey, whether it's true or not, I said, 1,200,000 miles, not counting as vice president. So I know a lot about trains. And by the way, the reason we're doing it, the reason these guys supported it, it's not just Amtrak, it's also vehicles and buses in towns and cities and light rail. It's because it's going to clean the environment. Everybody knows if you can get on a train and travel from here to Columbus and do it quicker than you can in your car, you're going to do it. It's going to take thousands of vehicles off the road. But my point is, folks, look, there's so much we can do. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. When do we lose our absolute confidence in our ability to do anything? I was in the Tibetan plateau with Xi Jinping, with a translator. We each had a translator. And by the way, for the record, I turned all my notes over. Okay. And seriously, and so he looked at me and he said, "Can you define America for me?" I said, "Yes, I can. One word." And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Think about this. The one word that defines America better than any other country in the world. Possibilities. Possibilities. We've never believed there's anything out of our reach if we set our mind to it. And we've never failed when we've set our mind to it. Whether it's going to space or to the bottom of the ocean. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. Look, I just told you about those computer chips in Intel. It's going to make them here in Ohio. Well, America invented those chips. We invented them, nobody else. They helped power the NASA mission to the moon. They gave us a military edge in the Cold War. And the federal investment from NASA in the military that kept fledgling chip industry alive, brought down the cost of making them, built a market, ushered in a new digital age. But then we stopped investing in ourselves. These chips are now predominantly made overseas. We learned a hard lesson during the pandemic. 1/3 of core inflation we faced last year is because of automobiles, the cost. Why? We had a lot of buyers because wages went up 5.5%. People wanted to buy things, but why couldn't they buy them? Because they couldn't make them. Why couldn't they make them? They didn't have the chips, the shortage of semiconductors. That's not that the same thing happened here today with 3D printing and other advanced manufacturing that was invented and pioneered in America. These technologies revolutionize the way of life. They keep prices low for businesses and families. So let's make them in America again. Let's build a future here in America. Let's remember who in God's name we are. We're the only country in the world. And the reason why we're sometimes called ugly Americans who can be defined by the notion of possibilities. There's nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing beyond our capacity. Not a single thing. If we act as the United States of America. The United States of America. So folks, I really am optimistic because of the guys behind me and other men and women like them. We're about to enter a new period. We just got to stay the course, have confidence in ourselves. And by the way, there's overwhelming strength in our diversity. And it's about time. I'll end by saying, when I got elected, I made a promise. I said my administration is going to look like America. Whether it's a vice president or a secretary of state or a cabinet member or a senior person, it's going to look like America. And it does. And one more thing. I know how to say the word union. Not labor, union. The single best workers in the world. So folks, let's go do this, okay? I want to thank the folks here. I want to thank all the major corporations here. And I want to thank what you're doing, all the small businesses we're going to bring together here. You're bringing together because we're going to provide good, decent jobs. And we're going to educate people to be able to handle all these jobs. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.